On this episode of Municipality, we will share the second part of our interview with State Representative Erika. Please enjoy. Are state representatives paid?
Yes, we are paid in Massachusetts. And then,
If you are, how much money do you make?
yeah, so in Massachusetts, and this is actually kind of unusual for state legislatures. If you go to like New Hampshire or Maine, it's not the case. But in Massachusetts, we are actually paid as full-time legislators. Some states, they get a small few hundred or a few $1,000 stipend a year. In my case, I think we've actually cleared about a little over six figures, so it's about 100K if you include the travel stipend. I think the base pay is like 70 or 80 if I remember correctly. So it's in that range. It's changed recently, so I have to go back to check the exact amount. But we are paid as full-time employees. Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt one more time. Sorry.
Oh yeah, please.
I got follow-up for that.
Yeah.
So that's a really compelling contrast also, because 2 weeks ago, we hosted a city councilor from Somerville. And we learned that city councilors make $40,000 or $45,000 if you're the city council president. So it's really interesting then to see, which elected position comes with a full-time salary.
Absolutely, yeah. And I will say too, I think one thing that's tricky with Somerville City Council, I'm just throwing in my 2 cents on that too. Somerville is a pretty big city. It's 90,000 people. You could argue in a smaller town, right, to be a city councilor or town councilor, it's not a full-time job. But I think in Somerville's case, like our city councilors do serve a lot of full-time functions, so they really, I think, should be paid more and have some more support staff because they are, it is kind of a choice that we make publicly, And it's a political, it's tricky, like wages and salaries of your own. It's the, can be contentious issue, but
And I have one more follow-up.
Please,
I was curious earlier when you mentioned about paying staffers, you run an office.
Yes.
It sounds. When you get your salary, does that cover your staff, or is that something that you have to work on, or does every legislator get a budget?
So we don't. So it's funny because we choose who our staff is, but we don't get to decide like any sort of like manager. Like the salary is set by the speaker's office.
Okay.
And so that's been actually an issue I've had in the past. So I've supported the State House Employees Union to form a union. They aren't currently recognized as an official union. As a result, legislative aides have been really underpaid. I mean, it's really unsustainable. And in my case, right, I want my aide to be my aide, but if he can't afford to be my aide, that's a problem. And I don't have I can advocate for a higher wage, but I don't get to set the staff amount, which is different because sometimes I think Boston City Council, they can choose the pay because they get a certain budget, and so they can hire one person and pay them a lot, or hire 4 people and pay them, so they can make those decisions. I don't have that freedom, but so that's another piece that is important. And I will say, when we've had good union organizing activities with the state legislative, the MSHEU, they had a bump in the past few years, which was good, but I think it needs to go further. So
Thank you.
Of course.
I gotta pause just because we're back recording and ready for your question when you're ready.
Our school building at 115 Sycamore Street was in really bad shape for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
Were you aware of some of these things that were breaking down at our school?
Yes, so I was aware of that, and a few educators told me about the conditions at the school, and so I did a little tour with the principal before the ceiling fell. And so I was aware of it, and we were trying to push for funding. Unfortunately, that is a ongoing, really big struggle in our state government. Is there's not enough money for schools, and of course now it's like things have gotten so bad that we need to do something about it. But yes, I was aware of the conditions and the water leaking and the bathrooms and being really, it's not the only thing, but I remember that was the things that they pointed out to me when I was there.
What's a good advice you have to share with us?
Okay, I think whatever form it takes, please get involved civically. I think a lot of times, and especially moments like now in this current political climate, there are things that make us, they try to make us feel small, right? That we're not impactful, that like we can't do, we don't make a difference. And that's all like not true. And I know that sounds kind of cliche, but it's really, there's so much power in what you all can do. A few years ago, I worked with parents and some students and educators who wanted to have fewer police presence in schools and actually just have police not in schools, as well as to have more clarity around what is the process when police come into schools. We faced a lot of pushback, but it was because, thanks to the students in the high school at the time who felt very strongly about this, they were able to make a lot of big improvements in your school. So even your own school, right, you can make a difference. So please stay engaged and involved, and whatever you're passionate about, work on that. So.
Do you like tea?
I do like tea, but I'm more of a coffee person, but I like tea. Coffee would be a little...
Do you speak any other language?
Yes, I do. So I grew up speaking Japanese when I was little. Learned English around 4 or 5 years old, and then I learned French in adulthood. So I lived in France for 5 years, so I'm also fluent in French. And I'm trying to learn Portuguese right now, but it's hard because my schedule is busy. But yes, do you speak Portuguese as well? You speak French? Oh my God, we can speak French. This is great. Yeah.
Can we make a list of the number of languages we now speak in this room right now?
Oh yes, let's do it.
Pause.
Yeah.
All right. So we got English, Japanese, and French, thanks to the state representative. We got Arabic. We got Portuguese.
I speak French.
Spanish. Anyone else?
What?
I speak Bosnian.
I speak Portuguese.
I think we already said Portuguese.
Yeah.
That's amazing. We got 7 languages.
Awesome.
Does anyone want to say something in Portuguese?
Tchau.
Oh,
Oi. Você gosta de chá?
Oh, awesome. Thank you. What does that mean? It's muito bem.
Do you like tea?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Can you say something in Japanese?
I can say konnichiwa or arigatou gozaimashita. Okay, one's useful is like middle school is chugakko. Chugakko is middle school. Yeah. In French, what should I say? Bonjour.
Send your recording
Oh my gosh, that was a lot of fun. I think we have just a few more questions. So let's hear what those are.
What inspired you to take this career path, and how long have you been doing this work for?
That's a great question. So I was actually not working in politics at all until I'd say 2018, 19. So that was 6-7 years ago. I was doing something completely different called antitrust economics, which we won't get into now. But what inspired me was actually the first, in 2016, Bernie Sanders ran for president, and I worked on his campaign. And I was inspired by the movement that was in that campaign, but also I was curious, what's happening in my own state in Massachusetts, because I was traveling around the country for that campaign. And when I got back to Massachusetts, Trump was president. And I was like, well, even though Trump is president, there's things we could be doing, like the Safe Communities Act would prevent our law enforcement from talking to immigration enforcement. And Massachusetts wasn't passing that bill. Another issue I really cared about was school funding. So we have a really inequitable school funding model in our state. In 2018, there was a push to make it more equitable. And essentially our state house was like, yeah, we'll fund like 1/4 of what you want. And I was like, that's nuts, right? So that's how I got involved at the state level, was advocating for those issues and for more transparency in the legislative process. And so that's how I eventually became to run for state rep, which was in 2020 during COVID. So yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you. From what you were saying,
Yes.
a student actually has a follow-up question. You want to come up to the microphone and ask, or do you want me to just ask? We are wondering how long you've been working with Somerville-related problems or with the community that we see every day. Is that
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say, before 2020, like 2018, working on like the Safe Communities Act and like the, school funding, those impact Somerville, but they weren't like just specific to Somerville. I'd say like really when I got involved with like the really local stuff, like the Otis Street Bridge, right, to cross over here and dealing with like road issues or, responding to people who were hit by car, like all the more like hyper local stuff, that probably, honestly started more recently in 2021. So, yeah.
And I think a lot of the things you just listed, we also all have experiences with some of those problems. So that's really amazing that we get to talk directly with you. We got one more question.
Yeah.
What questions do you have for us? Is there anything about the Wildcat life, the Winter Hill life, or anything that we can help you with?
I'm curious what you all, if you had to pick like 3 important issues or one, what are the issues you care about?
Would y'all feel more comfortable if I stop recording for this part? Yeah. I'm going to
Stop recording. Yeah.
But then we can...
Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for part 3. And remember, you can follow us on Instagram, YouTube, or Spotify.